Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishna Project podcast. This is episode number 177, which is quite remarkable. This was the podcast I was meant to do 10 episodes of and get bored. But for some bizarre, miraculous reason, we've made it to our 177th episode. I don't know if there's anything super spiritual about the number 177. House number 77 was where my grandparents used to live, so it does mean something to me. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button so you can be kept updated about future podcasts and video productions from the Hare Krishna Project. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, which is the other place or platform you can watch these podcasts, if you haven't already, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page. Whenever I say those things, the number of likes and followers and subscribers does increase, which means that you are listening to me. Thank you. And I am also incredibly grateful to our ever-growing global audience. I'm always intrigued to hear or find out who's listening and watching every week. It's not just me and my mum. Other people do tune in as well. And one of the things I love about doing this particular seva or this service is I get to virtually travel all around the world, meet some fascinating people from countries I've never been to. And I think I should do a Hare Krishna Project podcast world tour and go and visit all the countries that I have interviewed people in. And if that ever does happen, I have to go to Australia because Australia is a wonderful place. And our guest this week is from Down Under. I'm delighted to welcome Natasha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to your podcast for quite a few years and really like it. So
My
keep
goodness.
going.
I'm delighted that you've been listening for so long, and I'm delighted that you're now sitting in the hot seat as a guest. I think probably, not that I've gone through the stats and looked at them, you're probably maybe the fifth or sixth guest from Australia, possibly. As you know, I told you before we hit the record button, my sister-in-law is from Australia. She's currently in the UK. My brother's giving her a tour of where he's from. Which won't last very long. But yeah, so Australia is a place I've never been to, but I feel that out of duty, I should do at some point. Okay, Natasha, you're actually my favorite type of guest because I don't know a lot about you, which means I will be just as surprised by the answers as the viewers, and so I will look surprised as well when you say things to me. So we will start though with a nice, easy question. It's the first question that every guest gets. Please tell us a little bit about you and where you are from.
Yeah, so Natasha, born and brought up here in Australia, in Sydney. Um, my parents come from India. They came here in their early 20s. And I've always been curious about spirituality, which eventually took me to ISKCON. I have worked in the fitness industry for over a decade, which was an accidental career, and I've absolutely loved it. Also worked in media. I think, as we discussed, I did a Bachelor of Communication with a journalism major, so I've always loved writing. I love getting to know new people and asking them questions, so that's what took me to that studies. Also, just because my dad pretty much told me I had to study something, so I just picked something that I already enjoyed doing. Yeah, what else? I love Australia because of the beaches, so that's a good reason to travel here.
I mean, as I've said, I've never been to Australia, but I have watched Neighbours a few times. Can't believe I admitted that on a Hare Krishna Project podcast. And so it always looks very hot and very luxurious and always very warm. Is it really always hot and very luxurious in that way?
Mostly. So this time of the year is a little cold, but you still see people walk around in their flip-flops, which I do accidentally sometimes as well. So it doesn't really get that cold. It doesn't get that cold. might rain for a bit, but yeah, mostly it's nice and warm, I would say. Yeah, that's why
Fantastic.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure how I would go living in the UK because of the cold.
Oh, it's extremes here at the moment. One question you mentioned about getting involved in the Hare Krishna movement, you were seeking, spiritual knowledge, spiritual information. Before that, in terms of your own upbringing, did you have a particular religious or spiritual upbringing?
With somewhat of a religious and spiritual upbringing. My mum came from something called an Arismaji Hindu background. My granddad, her dad was a priest actually, so she was very devout to her practices and grew us up in quite a structured way. So we would wake up, we would do prayers in the morning, we would do small prayers before we ate food, we would do prayers before we went to bed. Not that my mum necessarily taught us why we were doing any of these things, but yeah, we had a little altar at home that we would do the prayers in front of and have incense and play kurtals. Like I was never taught how to do them properly, so I just played them pretty badly if I was ever asked to do them. But yeah, just the traditional things, so bowing down to the altar, eating mostly vegetarian, doing prayers and going to Hindu occasions and celebrating them, learning a bit about some of the Hindu gods. Like I did grow up watching um, stories and videos about Krishna when he was a kid
Mm.
and the Mahabharata. So I did learn about that when I was younger. So yeah, and there were certain prayers I learned growing up as well.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of getting involved in the Hare Krishna community or movement, um, how did you discover Krishna consciousness? And how did you meet the devotees? What was going on in your life, and what uh, caused you to get involved with that spiritual activity?
Yeah, look, so there I did go to a few kirtans with my family when I was a kid. They did take us to the ISKCON temple when we were little, and they did take us to the farm, but it wasn't like they were devotees. It was just one of the Hindu temples that they took us to. So I did have exposure to the Mahamantra. I also went to high school with a devotee. She was from the UK actually, so she came to my high school, I think, when we were about in year 10 or year 11. So I do remember her as the Hare Krishna friend, because she wasn't shy about it, I guess. And when I went to her place, she had an altar, and she tells me she fed me prasadam. I don't remember any of this, but this is what she says. Uh, about 12 years ago, I was distributed a Science of Self-Realization when I was strolling through the city. I remember reading that book in like one weekend because I loved it so much. But I didn't necessarily go to a community after that. I didn't go to the temple. I think I remember seeing an advertisement for the temple in the book, but at that age, I wasn't necessarily keen on going to temples. I was occupied with other things. And then at about 2020, actually no, from about 2019, I was following Jay Shetty online, and I think through something he shared, I started listening to Radhanath Swami, and I wasn't aware that he was linked to ISKCON. Uh, but it sounded similar to a Hindu movement I was a part of about 10 years ago, like the things that they were sharing. So I was just, and I wasn't living close to that place anymore. So I started listening. Um, so yeah, and that happened. I think I was just listening online for a few years. And then early 2021, I walked into a Whole Foods store and I saw the book Higher Taste. And I actually already had that book. I took it from my dad's bookshelf. Uh, because I wanted to make vegetarian food, and that seemed like a good book for that. And I asked the person behind the counter, I was like, oh, like where did you get that book from? And he said, "Oh, the Hare Krishnas brought it in and gave it. There's a temple down the road." And I was like, "What? There's a temple down the road?" And my best friend and I at the time, we were talking about temple hopping together because we used to talk about spiritual stuff all the time. And so I was like, I put it on my like to-do list. I was like, must visit the Hare Krishna temple. And I'd already put on my shopping list as well to buy a Bhagavad Gita with English purports or English explanations. And yeah, so the next week, I was going to the Whole Food store, walking to the Whole Food store, and I remembered that I didn't go to the temple. So instead of going to the Whole Food store, I checked on my Google Maps where the temple was and just started walking there instead. I was in jeans and like I wasn't okay. Even though I've been brought up with my mum telling me how I should dress going to temples, it'd been a long time, so conveniently I'd forgotten. Um, and yeah, I walked to the temple and uh, took my sneakers off, and there was a monk sitting at the book distribution table. And my friend had asked me a question actually that I didn't know the answer to. She thought I would knew because of my spiritual experiences previously. So I just remember seeing that monk and just going, he's going to know the answer. Because I just remember feeling like if people are asking me questions and expecting me to know the answers, I should probably go find out the answers. So I wasn't going through anything particularly bad in my life, and I wasn't like, oh, I need that like spirituality because of that. It was just inquisitiveness. It was more like questions like about philosophy and yeah, and just about doing something better other than going out drinking and going out to restaurants or going clubbing. Like it was just my friend and I discussing about better things to do with our lives. And yeah, so just from there, I bought a Gita. I was actually finishing my studies. I was finishing my communication studies with my journalism major, and I was trying to combine my spiritual interest with um, my studies. So I asked if I could interview a monk, and I ended up writing quite a few articles on ISKCON after that. And yeah, I got sent to an event they had on called Festival of Inspiration. And I recorded that event and I asked Devamrita Swami some questions. And then from there, I was kind of sold. I had such a nice experience in the kirtan, and I was like, what is this Krishna consciousness? I want to be Krishna conscious. And I started doing service at the temple. I started, yeah, I just was like, I wanted it all. I started researching everything online. I was like, what do I have to do? Because in 2020 as well, I had like an idea of the type of spirituality I wanted. I wanted meditation, I wanted diet, I wanted fun, and I wanted the philosophy. And I didn't think anything existed to have that as a complete whole. And then once I found ISKCON, I was like, oh no, there is something that exists with it all. So I was really happy about that.
Great, great. Thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate it. You mentioned a couple of times then about your degree. Can we talk about that? You studied, you read communications with a major in journalism, I think you mentioned. What kind of inspired you to read that? What encouraged you to go to university and study that particular thing?
Yeah, so I feel like that's to me, that's a bit of an interesting journey in itself. I was always writing from when I was a little kid. First, it started off when I was really little, like a dear diary, just expressing my thoughts, and then that never stopped. Like journal writing was always really big for me. I wasn't necessarily like in high school, like really like a high performer in English, but I just loved writing. And then actually out of high school, the degree I got into and did to begin with was social science. I was going to possibly do psychology, but then I decided I didn't really want to listen to people's problems for the rest of my life. But surprisingly, that naturally kind of happens with me. People tend to open up quite a bit. But I took some time off. I became a personal trainer, and I was already working in the fitness industry. But my dad was like, "Okay, that's a hobby. So now figure out what you're gonna do for a living." And to me, I only really cared about food and writing. Like I liked to take care of eating healthy, and then I liked writing. So I had done a few self-development courses around that time as well, and one of the courses was based around communication. And what solidified for me to pursue that, to study, was I wanted to use communication to make the world a better place. So, yeah, and I thought it was natural because I liked writing. And yeah, so that was the main idea actually, to use communication to make the world a better place in whatever platform. To me, I'm most comfortable in writing. Like if I could just write
Mm.
24/7, I would be very happy. Interacting with people, speaking in front of people, I can do, but it doesn't come as natural as writing does to me. Um, but yeah, so that's what pushed me
Yeah,
to
no,
study.
thank you for sharing that. You and I are very similar. I love to write as well. And I love to kind of express ideas. It kind of, you get into the flow, I guess, and it just kind of comes out, we shared before we hit the record button that I'm definitely a morning person. So from 5 a.m., my brain's just buzzing, and I wish I had like three pairs of hands to do all the things that I want to do and do it all at once and things. And so I love writing, and I'd love to be in a position where I could write full time. Um, Various commitments don't allow me to do that, but Krishna knows my heart's desire. So we'll see
Same.
what happens, see what happens. And one thing I want to say, it might come up again later, is that it's important to remember that Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness wasn't necessarily about giving things up. Krishna consciousness is about using our talents and our skills and our interests and our enthusiasms and our hobbies to serve Krishna. Of course, there's things that we shouldn't be doing because they're really not good for our spiritual life. But ultimately, if you're a writer, write for Krishna. If you like to cook, cook for Krishna. If you're good at making money, make money for Krishna. If you have a real strong interest in helping people to have healthy bodies and look after their physical well-being, fantastic. Do that for Krishna. We ran a campaign here at the Hare Krishna Project 2 years ago. It's kind of ongoing, but we launched it big time 2 years ago called Just Add Krishna. And we printed about 10,000 leaflets and just distributed them. And we on the leaflet we presented quotes from Prabhupada that talked about just adding Krishna to your life. That's all you have to do. It's really easy, just add Krishna. And I actually, remember, I wasn't there. I remember reading a letter that Prabhupada wrote to who is now Sridharananda Goswami. And Sridharananda Goswami wrote to Prabhupada in the late 1960s and said, should I move to the temple or should I go to university, college or whatever? Prabhupada said, you should go and get your education because we want intelligent people to preach to intelligent people. Imagine how I mean, I couldn't survive living in a temple. I am so independent-minded that doesn't like to be told what to do. So imagine if we all moved into to a temple, like an ashram environment. We'd just feel like the Amish, wouldn't we? We'd be cut off from the world and not thought we have to be living in the real world, right? That's a figure of speech, to go out and share Krishna consciousness with others. So you said something earlier that made me really want to just emphasize Krishna consciousness is about just adding Krishna. It's that simple. You got to do a few other things as well, but just
Hmm.
that, Krishna. Okay. Thank you
Nice
for
reminder.
sharing. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I do really, really appreciate it. So we've talked a bit about how you got involved with the Hare Krishna movement, particularly the organization known as ISKCON. Uh, ooh, what are your connections now with the movement? And you know, uh, what what are your connections now with the movement?
Um, so in May, I actually came back from Europe, I spent some time staying at the ashram guest house in the manor, in the Bhaktivedanta manor, and I also stayed just under a week actually at Villa Vrindavana at the ladies' ashram there as well.
That's in, is
Um,
that in Italy?
yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Florence in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah. So before I went to the UK, which I went on the 12th of March, I had a lot of regular services here in Sydney, actually, which I have had for a few years. I haven't gone back to them since I've come back, but prior to going to Europe, I would do garlands once a week at the Sydney Temple. I started only recently writing for the newsletter for my local temple. And I was doing other services too. Like occasionally I would chop veggies. I was doing paraphernalia service. So I would go back in the deity department and wash the dishes and prepare like the Guru Parampara for the altar before Darshanarthi. So I was doing quite a few services prior to going to Europe. I had taken time off from those services before as well. Um, but yeah, garlands is kind of my main service. Occasionally, I would do kirtans in the temple. Uh, Occasionally, sing arati. Yeah, that's all I can remember now. But I know there's a
And
few more that I'm probably. Hmm.
so obviously, I'm intrigued at I'm keen to know. So you went to Europe, and your experiences in Europe have now led you to return to Australia and to discontinue. That's a bit of a technical term, isn't it? A very posh term. Calls you to discontinue your services. Why have you felt the need to discontinue your services with your local ISKCON community?
Well, that wasn't the exact plan initially. Initially, I had tickets booked to go back to Europe actually. So I was going to go back for a few retreats that were on and go do some volunteering and visit a few more temples. Because actually, my trip was meant to go till August. I came back earlier because I wasn't feeling well. But initially, I was like, okay, there's probably no point in going back into the services if I'm only here for a month or two. And then I started to reflect on my journey quite a bit. And this isn't solely to my experiences in Europe, actually, in comparison to my whole journey with ISKCON. Europe was probably the least of the tough. But I guess over the years since I have started being involved with Hare Krishna movement here in the West, which is mainly ISKCON, um, in Australia. I haven't had contact with, I guess, Gloria Vaishnav Vision outside of ISKCON just yet. Uh, but I've had a lot of extremely tough experiences, and I always reflected like I would never put up with this much in the material world. Um, and I think, yeah, coming back from Europe, looking at all of my experiences since it started, I just felt like it was too much for me. And I guess all of the bad experiences I've had, along with, I guess, research that I've done of the history of ISKCON and the current of ISKCON, um, I find that, you go to a movement because of kind of what you're sold. And then going to the movement, I realized upon reflection, there's a lot of stress with challenges I've had personally, and then reading about, what the movement's involved in. So for me, I decided recently, not too recently, in the last month or so, that for my own mental health for my own benefit. I think I need to keep some distance. Uh, like I still have a lot of friends who are involved and I'm in contact with. So there's a lot of lovely people that I've met and that I plan to stay in touch with. But yeah, I just think from my perspective, the challenges I've had, I don't think they will change. So
I
yeah, for my own, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to answer all of my questions because sometimes I feel like I'm a bit kind of pushy and trying to get information from the guests. But you mentioned just now that you've had to put up with a lot of stuff, a lot of things. I think particularly in ISKCON. Do you mind sharing what some of those things are or what they have been?
From the start, and this is one I don't talk about a lot actually because I was trying to protect someone else's image. But when I walked into the temple that time that I told you to buy that book, the brahmachari who was in Saffron, and they try and cover this up and say they're doing this for preaching, but he had like asked for my number and then he was like messaging me and it felt like really flirtatious. And perhaps to them they think they're being flattering, but to me it was really weird. And I wasn't very like responsive because I was like, he's meant to be a monk. Why is this guy like being flirty with me? And it was weird that he'd even like I felt it was weird that he even got my number. But so he was kind of like nurturing me, I guess, at the start, but I felt sometimes he was just a bit weird. Like there was just a weird kind of feeling there. And then because I started listening to Bhagavatam classes pretty quickly, and they were trying to make it like I knew this was targeted at me, but they were trying to make it out like I was Maya. And it made me feel really bad about myself. They would talk about the stories and these are meant to be very inspiring stories, which I do see now how inspiring they are. But at the time, I felt really bad about myself because I felt like they were making me out to be like a prostitute, like the way that they would bring up those stories with the prostitute. And I had just started going to the temple, and so that was one thing that
Just to say, Natasha, I've heard that quite a bit before. Women have talked to
really.
me about how brahmacharis and others have started to refer to them as Maya, and they felt really bad about it. You know, my opinion is a woman can wear what they want. You can have your hair however you want. You can have your face however you want. It's a man's problem if they have lustful thoughts over you. It's not your problem. So a woman should never feel guilty about how they're looking. But I have heard
Mm.
that before in the Hare Krishna movement, you know, and group of men in the temple, and the nickname for the woman is Maya, you know. So yeah, sorry, thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and that unfortunately that experience went on for a lot longer than it should have. Um, so that brahmachari was quite friendly with me for some time, and then out of nowhere just kind of stopped talking to me, like didn't even have a conversation, like, by the way, we need to not interact now or not talk. He just stopped talking to me. And yeah, that was really difficult. So I kind of just viewed him as my friend. That was helping me spiritually. But I guess upon reflection, I had realized that, yeah. But my home temple, the way that they do things is quite old school. Or like it's a bit too, perhaps used to be a little bit too fanatical in that regard. So yeah, that was one of the first experiences that was a bit bothering, I guess, like being spoken about like Maya and being made to feel like I'm a prostitute, or, perhaps just because I have photos of myself in what to me is normal clothes, Western clothes, like on my social media or something like that. So I felt like they maybe looked and judged or something like that. Um, but this also ties in, I guess, with other experiences I had too. So early on, there was a senior devotee that was kind of nurturing me, and I felt like she'd become really critical towards how I was dressing, or yeah, like so this was all around the same time. This devotee, there was a few things she had said. Firstly, she'd made me feel like I was too old to begin my life in Krishna consciousness because I was just in my early 30s. And then also she had made it out like I was dressing like Krishna consciousness was like I was focused on externals, which she didn't really know what was going on internally for me. So that was really heartbreaking. And the same devotee had then just gave my service away and didn't tell me and was quite harsh to me about it. And then I just expressed to her like how I was hurt that she gave my service away. So I'd never brought up anything else, like the comments about the dress or the appearance. I just ignored that. Or even the comments about age, I just ignored it. Um, but I said something when she gave my service away, and then that kind of turned into a thing. Like, so what happened from there is her and I kind of just stopped talking, even though I gave her the opportunity, like when I was ready to have that conversation. But what happened from there is she had her partner was, I think, one of the leadership people in the temple, and then all the classes from there I knew were targeted at me because of that situation. And this went on for years as well. Like every time I was in a class, they were talking about, they were making it out like I was attached to the service or and how I shouldn't be attached to the service, and talked about even the appearance thing. So I knew this was all coming from her. So these devotees, up until now, which has been 4 years, they still don't talk to me, even though I've, tried to be kind and open with them. And it really made me lose faith in devotees, actually. I never stopped my practice, but it just felt like what they were preaching and what they're doing is so different. Like you're saying, Bhakti's for everyone, but it's not. You're not saying it is. And I didn't feel welcomed. And yeah, and years later, I ended up sending a long email to one of the brahmacharis about this because they were still talking about it in the classes. So then I never said anything. I never defended myself. But then I finally just wrote down everything that happened, and then they finally stopped talking about it in classes, and then they finally saw my side. But it's like it felt really political, I guess, from there. So that was one experience with Sydney Temple. Um, and then when I stayed at New Govardhan, so I lived at New Govardhan for a few months in the ladies' ashram. The plan was only ever to stay there for a short time. So that was early 2022. Um, and the temple president is great there. He was very supportive to have me stay there for a long time because they have Grihastha community there as well. Now, there were a few girls in the ashram who kind of gave me a hard time when I first went there, which is apparently quite normal when you join an ashram. And I know you've had guests in the past who kind of say the opposite of what I'm about to say. But so what happened was in Sydney, I told them I'm going to go stay at the ashram in New Govardhan. No one really said anything like to stop me. And ISKCON Sydney Temple is quite Indian dominated. Not many like me unless they're like kids, but mostly from India. Whereas New Govardhan is a Western community. So I went there. No one really thinks I'm Indian. Usually, I can usually get away with fitting into like fitting in with the Indians by speaking Hindi and fitting in with the Westerners because I'm an Aussie pretty much. But So yeah, apart from I guess having a few of the girls be a little bit hard on me when I first got there, I think something I found quite difficult, and maybe it's because, and I know this is on the bodily platform, but it's still difficult to deal with. I felt there was a little bit of racism, not a little bit, there was racism towards Indians. So whenever Indians would come, it's like they were happy to take their donations, but they didn't want them to be a part of the community. So no one directly treated me like that, but just hearing that, it hurts, I guess, because even though I'm born and brought up here, like my parents are still people who were born and brought up in India. So I can, yeah, take it maybe a bit personally. And I guess for me, like in the Sydney temple, no one thought I was Indian actually, but they were still very welcoming to me. So I felt like in the opposite way, although the community is dominated by Indians and Nepalese, they would never say other people are not welcome. And then in fact, because they didn't think I was Indian, they actually would give me a lot of love, I felt. So so sometimes I find it, and I have friends like Aussie friends as well who struggle with going to the Sydney temple, and I understand it can be overwhelming. And perhaps I have more of an understanding of the culture. That's why I'm able to go there and not be bothered by them speaking another language or um, the customs or. But it is, yeah, go on.
Quite a lot of what you're saying, I hear often, or every
Mm,
now and then from devotees. Only yesterday morning, I had a conversation with an older white man who's a devotee. He lives in South London, and he was saying that he really hates hanging out with devotees. He just hates it because he has to put on this image and this mask and pretend to be someone he's not, and he just wants to feel relaxed. So he just avoids devotees, even though he is a devotee. He's trying to be a devotee. So I hear that often, and if I think about myself, if I'm really honest, most of my real genuine friendships are with non-devotees. My longest friend is an atheist, and she's a woman. And it's great. She's honest with me about so many things, and I appreciate her honesty. And so, I've heard these things before. We try to avoid devotees because it's so awkward. We have to kind of put on this performance. And on the racism thing, I hear that often in so many ways in different settings. I mean, I gave a series of talks a couple of years ago called Inclusive Vaishnavism. And one of them was if we're not the body, why does racism exist in the Hare Krishna movement? And my on my travels over the last 20 years, I've established that certainly uh, uh, by its teachings, or certainly by what it says, the Hare Krishna movement preaches more than any other that we're not the body. We're not the body. We're not the body, which sounds attractive, because I want to live forever, But then it's disturbing then when you join the movement and you see racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia and all the different phobias and fears are just as real in the Hare Krishna movement as they are in the outside world.
mm,
And it's just sad.
yeah.
It's just so sad because we've joined this movement to escape from those labels or those prejudices. And
It feels more prominent actually within the movement than it does outside movement. Um,
yeah, yeah,
like
I agree.
just my experience here in Australia, I guess. But it might just be the dynamics as well. Because yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. Uh, I mean, the short talk that I gave a couple of years ago, which is going to go in a book called Inclusive Krishna at some point, was about uh, my own experiences as a white man at Bhaktivedanta Manor. and that I felt that I was treated differently uh, uh, because of my skin color, in England. So, and anyway, I've heard a lot of these type of things before. So
It probably
I
does
can
happen, you're right.
I can vouch for you. Definitely is what I'm saying, and I definitely, support everything that you say. What I find really inspiring though about you, Natasha, is that despite a lot of the things you've had to put up with, I love that expression about 20 minutes ago. I've had to put up with a lot. Despite that expression, despite the things you've had to put up with, um, I love the fact that you still have this love and dedication and devotion to Srila Prabhupada. I think that's, certainly in the dialogue we've had over the last couple of months, I think we've been in contact, exchanging messages about a number of issues. Um, can you tell us a bit about your relationship with Srila Prabhupada? Um, and in particular, the Prabhupada that you're in a relationship with outside of the institution of ISKCON.
Yeah, so I've taken a few breaks from going, like doing regular service with the temple or any preaching movement. And I didn't even tell you all of my challenging experiences, by the way. But uh, for some reason, I think when I first started going to the Sydney temple, I felt a connection to Prabhupada. I can't really explain it, but last year I did start reading his original Gita, and I can already like I could just feel the difference immediately. Like there was just potency in his unedited book that wasn't there in the edited version. And look, I've met Jay Adwaita Swami. He's come to the Sydney Temple, and I had like a private darshan with him, with obviously a male devotee there, and he seems like a cool guy, but. But yeah, I like the unedited books. And so with Prabhupada, it's just like you even hear the disciples from his time talk about the movement when he was around, and it just sounds so lively and it sounds like exactly what I thought I was walking into, but then realized I wasn't. So the like how they speak about, just the ecstatic, the joy, like just the sharing of it. And it just sounds like there's a real lack of politics in that time. It was really for everyone and anyone, and there was really no judgment. And the way that people just so new in the movement were becoming so dedicated. Like one of the things I had challenges with when I first started practicing was people trying to slow me down. And I felt like people were trying to like take away my enthusiasm. And upon reflection, a lot of things that were said to me, a lot of, yeah, it really felt like they were trying to dampen my enthusiasm. Like I was so, like when I first walked in 2021, I just wanted to preach. I like straight away, I wanted to preach. I was so excited. And that was just dampened, like and I knew it was happening. I'm like, why would you like in the back of my mind, I'm like, why would you try and take away someone's enthusiasm? And that's why it doesn't feel like that's what Prabhupada would want, I guess. Like why would you yeah, why would you stop someone's enthusiasm for practicing and for preaching? Because that's what the movement is meant to be about, is making devotees and making more devotees. So I didn't quite understand. But yeah, I think for me now I feel I think previously I probably didn't listen to Prabhupada's classes as much, whereas I feel like now I can listen to his classes, I can read his books, and I know devotees who are dedicated in that way as well, and I don't need to go do service at a particular organization or institution to feel that connection, I guess. But yeah, there was also this one odd time I remember when I was doing garlands in the temple, I always would sit next to Prabhupada, and there was this devotee that came in. She gives really nice Bhagavatam classes, and I was making garlands, and she was just praying to Prabhupada, and I remember thinking, yeah, why isn't she giving classes anymore? And for some reason, and I would never do this, but I like interrupted her while she was praying. I was like, "Can I ask you a question?" And she was like, "One second," like she was wanting to finish her prayers. And then when she came over, I was like, "How come you haven't given classes, for so long?" And she's like, "That's really weird. I was just praying to Prabhupada about that." She was literally just saying, like, apparently she was saying, "Oh, like, I'm sorry, I haven't given classes. Do you think I should give classes, like, to Prabhupada?" And I just interrupted her for some reason. But yeah, I'm not the type of person that can say Prabhupada has been in my dreams, or like I feel like Prabhupada speaks to me. I don't I think the only way he speaks to me is through his books or through his classes, or through devotees. But yeah, he risked a lot, and he was definitely an empowered soul. So yeah, he was very liberal with how he shared Krishna consciousness, and he really made it a house for everyone. And I personally know that's not what ISKCON is doing, unfortunately,
Mm.
anymore. It's not a house for everyone. They might say that in the classes, but they're just saying that.
I'm agreeing with everything that you say, and and there are so many people that contact me on a regular basis about similar issues as to what you're sharing with me. I can assure you, though, there are still a number of temples. Some of them are still within ISKCON, and some of them are independent from ISKCON that still have that authentic devotion and dedication to Prabhupada. And certainly offline, I'm happy to share with you some details of temples and communities that still have that real drive and that organic authenticity for following Prabhupada. So it still exists in the movement. It's not as easy to find. When you were just talking about your experiences and your thoughts there, I was thinking about ISKCON's 2-year training program or mentorship program for getting initiated. 2 years. So it's called the mentorship program. And actually, one ISKCON guru who's quite rebellious, I won't say his name, he once referred to it to me in a private conversation as the tormentorship program. Instead of mentorship, tormentorship. 2 years to get initiated, and you have to do these courses and attend these meetings and get up. Well, we should be getting up early anyway. I accept that. I do that. I like doing that, but you have to write in your diary what time you're getting up and read the books, and it's like being in a boot camp for the army. The word, well, initiation means many things, but initiate also means to start at the beginning, and that definitely wasn't the system in Prabhupada's time. It definitely wasn't the system in Prabhupada's time. It was, I understand things have to be a bit more different now because Prabhupada's not here in the physical sense. I accept that. But a 2-year program in order to get the first step of initiation in ISKCON, that puts so many people off. And and I've seen that, and people contact me on a regular basis about what you've just said, that actually you feel like you're being blocked, or there's this stagnant growth, or I've seen in the UK the lack of growth, particularly amongst the Western community. The Western community is not joining ISKCON, and it has no desire to do so. Many years ago, in a previous life, I used to serve on the ISKCON UK National Council. They hate it whenever I mention this in the podcast. And I remember that one sannyasi who was really trying said, maybe we should talk about preaching at these meetings. And the GBC said, okay, we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. And I remember it was on the agenda for the next meeting for like 10 minutes. And it was on there for 3 times for 10 minutes. And then they went back to talking about buildings and money and how to attract more members of the Indian community to come to Diwali. And I remember the whole experience was quite comical because I'd never been part of an organization like it in my life. that actually
Mm.
didn't want to grow amongst its target audience that the founder had originally wanted it to grow amongst. So I was sad, but also I just find the whole thing quite comical. So thank you for sharing what you've shared. I really appreciate it. I also really love, Natasha, how you have this kind of great uh, enthusiasm for seeing greater unity within the Hare Krishna movement. Why is that so important? It might be like an obvious rhetorical question, but why is unity, acceptance, and inclusion important in the Hare Krishna movement?
Yeah. Look, I'm not sure why personally it's important to me, perhaps because I have never felt like I'm fully Indian or fully Australian. I've felt like I'm a bit of both. And I think just growing up in Australia, I've had such a different range of friends. Like, in high school, there was never really any other Indian girls. So most of my, apart from that one devotee that came from the UK in year 11 or year 10. But I think I'm just used to seeing that within Australia in itself because Australia is so multicultural and it's grown in so many different cultures. So I think personally, because I've been able to be friends with Asians, Arabs, Europeans, Caucasians, Indians, Sri Lankans, all like so many different nationalities. And then to come to a movement that says you're not the body and you're not the mind, I assumed they were able to look past
Hmm.
these outer, uh, temporary designations that we have. But I found more segregation within the movement. And I can only really speak of the experiences I've had here. And I wouldn't say, yeah, I think the more I learn about ISKCON though, and the more experiences that I have, I can see many different perspectives. So firstly, ISKCON can't help but to grow with the Indian demographic, the Indian diaspora in the Western community. That's just naturally going to happen. And I think a lot of the Indians who are within the preaching services, they do want to grow it to Western communities. But there is a challenge, when you walk into a temple and there's confronting uh, traditions, and when it's like even for me, going to the Sydney temple, I don't feel like there's people like me there, like a lot of them. Like, there's people who are Indian who've just recently come from India. So even I feel out of place there. And I wouldn't say there's a lot of communities in Sydney that actually reflect my demographic at all. But it needs to be vice versa. Like I was really sad when I started to think and realize that perhaps the Western demographic didn't want Indians there. Like that kind of broke my heart a bit as well. Because firstly, I never considered like I just my citizenship says Australian. I'm born and brought up here. Like so for people like myself, it's kind of like a lifelong struggle then. Like so experiences, challenges you have out in the material world, you don't necessarily want to have in a spiritual community as well. You want people to see you past the body. So yeah, so Krishna consciousness really is for everyone. So I also found in the community that there wasn't a lot of place for single women. There wasn't a lot of place, yeah, like especially at the temple, they're just not welcome, I would feel. So I have friends who want to come to the temple, who want to be a part of things, but they don't feel welcomed because they're a single woman. So it's not just about race, it's about
Mm,
so many different
mm,
things, so many, like all of these temporary designations that we should be looking past, like age. Like I mentioned how that person had said I was too old. Like this is all so silly to me. Like so it's not just skin color or race or any of that. There's just so much silly cultural barriers. And it if an organization really wants to practice what they preach, they need to stop all of this.
Mm.
Like they like I guess the biggest concern for me is like the reason why I got attracted into Krishna consciousness is the way that it is promoted and propagated and what it's being sold as. But then when you go to a temple, when you go to these communities, the barriers you're facing, you're like, how is this a spiritual community? Like you really aren't practicing what you preach when so many different people are not welcome and you have judgments and uh yeah. So I think even recently, earlier this year, I started to question how can men tell women what is best for them? Like I started to realize the barrier there as well when it's like you don't understand a woman's challenges. How can you guide? And I don't know where I stand in regards to female gurus or anything like that. And I've met, I think, the one female initiating guru in ISKCON who's, I think, on pause until November from what I hear. But
Yeah, just like it's like watching a game show, isn't it? It's like, you can move to that space and you can move to that space. But if it makes you feel any better, it might not make you feel any better. I also have the same experiences as a single man. There isn't many opportunities for a single man. There is this real focus on I can understand the Varnashram system and getting married, and a lot of us just don't feel, actually, a lot of single people don't feel like we fit into this structure. And I think one of ISKCON's challenges has been it's a very socially conservative organization, and how we Westerners understand socially conservative. And it's trying to reach out to people in a socially liberal culture, so it's socially conservative around issues around marriage, maybe same-sex relationships, around family issues, and they're important. Of course, they're important, but it's trying to reach out to a socially liberal culture. So, I mean, I saw it. I was going to go off on a tangent, but I'm not. I was going to talk about one of the London temples, but we can talk about that offline. But ultimately, that's the challenge for ISKCON. How does a socially conservative organization reach out to a socially liberal Western public? And actually, it hasn't really, just hasn't. My experiences is that I about once a month or once every 2 months for my own sanity, I go to my local church. It's not because I identify as a Christian. It's just because they're nice to me and they welcome me. And whenever I visit, they give me a hug. And you know what? Even the ladies give me a hug as well. And it's wonderful. How are you? How's your week been? How are you feeling? How's work? They want to know about me. What's going on in my life? They don't judge me. They don't criticize me. They don't ask me if I'm getting married. They don't try and match me up with anybody, and it's wonderful. And those of us that are within the Hare Krishna movement need to get a lot better at just welcoming people for who they are at whatever stage they are in their life. Prabhupada did it. Prabhupada did it.
Yeah. And yeah, look, I did want to just say as well, which I may not have said earlier, there is actually a lot of really lovely people within the ISKCON Sydney temple community and within all the preaching movement. There's a lot of really lovely people. My feedback is actually just off, actually, unfortunately, not the general community. When I speak about them, perhaps like even as you speak about being a single person, one thing I thought was happening a lot through my time from going early on was through the classes by specific people is being put down for being single or how, you need to get married. And for me, like before ISKCON, I was very content with being on my own. I was very yeah, like content and going on. Like I would say I was happier, before I started to feel I get yeah, point out all these faults that I didn't even think were there. And yeah, so as a I can completely understand them what you're saying because I don't think there's anything wrong with being single, and I think for a movement that wants to preach to everyone and anyone and grow to everyone and anyone, they need to kind of understand how society is today and not make it wrong and not force a change there because people don't want to feel like there's something wrong with them out of a choice they're making. They don't want to feel less, but sometimes I feel it's for control that they want to make you feel like less as well.
Hmm. Thank you, Natasha. It, it- I don't know. I mean, I had some other questions. I mean, one of the questions was about does ISKCON need reform? But I think you probably answered that in a roundabout way. I mean, do you want to touch on that a bit? Does ISKCON need reform? And in terms of how could it reform?
I don't know if I'm qualified on how they can reform, but there's just some things that are really easy to see upon experience. And just all the efforts they're putting in for preaching, they also need to make sure once people are preached to, they're not given a bad experience and they're not put off
Hmm.
because there's so much effort putting into preaching. There's so much focus on preaching, which I think is great to share Krishna consciousness with everyone. But for example, with my experience, perhaps I was influenced by people overseas who are originally from the UK or America, and the way that they preach or the way that the community is very different to the community here in Australia. So I'm walking in with one expectation and getting another experience. So there's no unity even within ISKCON, which is very stressful. So that's a put off. All the conflict within ISKCON, which is very easy to see, it's quite a put off. So I think even just within ISKCON, they need to be unified on their message, on their purpose, on how they want to do things. Uh, and I think there definitely needs to be a lot more respect for women, and all types of women, not just like married women or women from a specific culture, like or women of a specific age. Like just respect all women. Um, but I'm not sure if these things will be able to change. Like the more I learn about who is in leadership and all of that, I kind of lose hope. Uh, but I guess I worry about who else is going to come into the movement with who might come into the movement that's vulnerable and get a bad experience. I'm not sure if many of the people could even put up with even just a small percentage of what I've put up with in my time, to be honest with you. I'm really not sure that most people would stick around through so many challenges, which I didn't fully speak about, which is probably a good thing.
Hmm.
But
I uh, I appreciate you being honest with what you have been honest with today, Natasha. I know it's not been easy for you, and we've been in dialogue for quite a long time now, actually. Uh, Several months or weeks at least, and we've been in dialogue, and I appreciate your support as well for these podcasts and what we do here at the Hare Krishna Project. And I always like to meet people like you who are able to really be open about your story, and I'm sure that your story will be inspiring to others who have experienced the same thing as you. you kind of rhetorically asked a question about, what does the future hold for ISKCON? What I'm seeing now on my travels and through the dialogue I have with people every day is that we're seeing more independent projects being set up now, particularly around Europe. And I know there's at least one independent temple in Australia as well now, and there's others elsewhere. I mean, the Hare Krishna project is an independent initiative. We're not linked with ISKCON, but we still follow Prabhupada. And we thought for a while we were on our own. And then we found an independent temple in Leicester in the UK. We found an independent temple in northern France. And it's great. We now work together. We've set up the League of Devotees 2.0, and there's more independent temples. I was in Scotland last week to visit Krishna Cafe, which is an independent project that not run by ISKCON, and they follow Prabhupada. You've got the Bliss devotees in South London who are fantastic friends of mine. So there's all these as a reaction to ISKCON's struggles. Thankfully, we're not losing faith in Radha Krishna, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the mission of Prabhupada. We are just doing it ourselves. And it's great. It's very liberating. And I remember, I've talked about this in the past a bit on this network, is that I went through a lot of mental health challenges myself in 2021 in ISKCON when I was being, gaslighted and verbally abused and physical abuse. My mother was receiving unpleasant messages. My mother's nothing to do with the Hare Krishna movement. My money was stolen. All these lies were going on around about me, and I was really, when I say close to the end, not in that way, but I was really close to leaving the movement completely. And I remember having a 2-hour conversation with a Prabhupada disciple one day. And he basically said to me, as soon as Prabhupada physically left the planet in November 1977, he decided to get out of ISKCON straight away. He didn't hang around, he didn't sit around, and he said it was the best decision of his life to get out of ISKCON because he knew what was going to happen. There's different expressions we can use for that. And it was the best decision of his life. And for the last 45 years, he's felt so liberated. And I then decided about 2 days later that I mentally, psychologically, emotionally needed to leave the institution of ISKCON. And it was one of the best decisions I have ever made. And I kept my faith in Krishna, in Prabhupada, and the blessings, it's a bit of a Christian term, have just kept coming. The Hare Krishna project was set up. We had nothing. We had no money. Now we've got a bank account. We've got money. We've got a supporters network. We're busy with events. It's wonderful. And all of a sudden, there's this whole network of people around Europe that are organizing events together, and it's liberating. So there is a future. There is a future by taking shelter of Prabhupada, is what I'm saying in a long-winded way.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear, because I even know people who walk away and just give up everything instead of, continuing their practices. And that's the one time I tried to walk away in the past. I gave up my practices, whereas this time, I guess, yeah, I don't feel like, I want to give up my practices. But yeah, but just again saying, like, there's still good people who do service within ISKCON. There's, in case someone watches and they think that I'm talking badly about them. But yeah, I think these are more structural, organizational issues versus the people who are doing service and who are everyday people involved. Or even, yeah, people who are dedicated full time. Not everyone is bad, hopefully. But yeah, so that's really good to know. I think, yeah, something I wanted to mention as well, which I did reflect on, is like they're still doing good. They're doing a lot of preaching, and I guess perhaps ISKCON is for a specific type of people, maybe not for me. And yeah, it's just interesting. Like, perhaps the challenges I've had were always just signs that it's just not for me. And it is what it is. And I think everything has its place. Yeah, in the material world, I would never ever put up with the amount of challenges I've put up with in ISKCON. So I always used to be very surprised at myself. Like, how are you putting up with all this? But yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to also emphasize for you, Natasha, if I can, is that Natasha and I are not talking about the whole organization of ISKCON. There's so many wonderful devotees that are serving hard, that are humble, that are sincere, that are making a difference. We're talking about changes that need to be made and different ways that leadership can do things. And it doesn't matter whether it's ISKCON or the Catholic Church or a political party or the Church of Scientology. I went there last week. You know, anywhere we are, we should not see ageism or sexism or xenophobia or homophobia or transphobia or any phobia or any type of discrimination. We should not see it anywhere. And we want a Hare Krishna movement, and today we're talking about ISKCON, to be free from those things. So people feel included and valued and accepted and loved.
Mm.
And I want to emphasize that too, on behalf of both of us, you know, and I'm really hoping for the very best for you, Natasha, for whatever you decide to do. You know, the future is very bright, isn't it? It's not always orange. It's it's very bright, and you can be you. That sounds a bit kind of namby-pamby and modern, but you can be you. Of course, you can be you. There's only one you, so make the decisions that are best for you. You know,
Mm.
no one else can tell you how to live your life other than you, and maybe your mum or your dad if you allow them. But my mum tries to sometimes, but I don't allow it. I'm 41 now, mum. Um, um, okay, I'm conscious of the time. One of the things I always find interesting about podcasts with devotees in Australia or New Zealand, there's always a massive time difference, you know, and it's it's becoming late in your area, where you are, and I'm about to go to work. Very because we started quite early here. So I think, Natasha, I'm gonna say goodbye to the viewers at home. Stay on the line. It's a bit like a chat show, isn't it? Stay on the line and we'll talk after. But I'm incredibly grateful to Natasha for being our guest this week on episode 177. I'm sorry it's taken 177 episodes to get to you. But I appreciate you tuning into a lot of them over the years. Obviously, you've been inspired by people's stories, and you know there are still stories to tell. So we'll keep going as long as more people want to share their stories. So I'm grateful to Natasha for being our guest this week. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button so you can be kept updated about all the things we do here at the Hare Krishna Project. And or if you're watching this on Facebook and you haven't already, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page, because as you will know by now, we don't just produce this podcast. We do Bhagavad Gita talks, book distribution, Hare Krishna Festival, school visits, and the original 1972 Bhagavad Gita as it is, as Natasha plugged. We also sell copies of that and we distribute it freely amongst people in the UK, particularly school children, teenagers. So we're always busy. It's good to be busy because it keeps me out of trouble. Okay, so until next week, I'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.